There's a new book coming out. It's called Apple in China. Subtitle is The Capture of the World's Greatest Company. Basically, the book is about how Apple built its empire with China's help, but now the partnership's turned into a dependence so deep that Apple may no longer be fully in control of its own destiny. And with this book revealing just how far that's gone, the question is, has Apple been captured? Today's video is brought to you by Brain.fm. It's focused music, it sounds great, it's science-backed, it really works. You can check it out for free using the link down below. This book is essentially a tale about how a competitive advantage, Apple and the relationship with China in manufacturing and China as a marketplace for them to sell into, went from being an advantage to perhaps being quite a liability. Apple's relationship with China, if you'll remember, started as a way to manufacture things cheaper, faster, more at scale. But now China isn't just Apple's factory, it's also one of Apple's biggest customers. And all you have to do is look at Apple's marketing to see how important China has become in terms of strategy. But as global tensions rise and you have the US and China sort of facing off in many various domains, ranging from Hollywood to technology, to any other sphere of influence, then Apple's relationship with China is something that's going to make people be like, now hold on just a second, is this what's best for me, the consumer? Is this good for shareholders? Is this something that should continue? Maybe does Apple need to rethink things? I mean, some people could even go so far as to say, is Apple still an American company if its survival depends on China's market and government policies? Because either Apple finds a way to reduce its reliance on China or it becomes a company that must bend to Beijing's rules. As you look at the global business landscape and then you look at the landscape of opinions surrounding this particular issue, you know, there's some people who are like, this is just global business. This is the reality today that companies need to deal with. And then you have other people who are like, Apple's walking a tightrope here. And that tightrope could snap at any given time. And that would have implications for Apple's customers. Back in '96, Apple did some offshoring. And it could be that that ended up really saving Apple to some extent. But if a company ends up relying on a single country for both its supply chain and its revenue, then it's not 100% in control of its own fate anymore. It's just not. Let's just remember the T word, right? Tariffs. Tariffs are sort of what's happening right now. And there's talk about tariffs between America and China. And if there's some sort of retaliatory action, then it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to understand that Apple could really be in a tough spot and their supply chain could functionally break overnight. Right now, the iPhone 60 Pro costs a pretty penny. Can you imagine if there were price hikes or product delays or entire product lines that disappeared? I mean, and honestly, this isn't really just about Apple, it's about the global tech industry. So if Apple's in a spot where Apple can't even pull away from China, then what does that mean for other smaller companies? So you want to watch Apple's next moves pretty carefully. If they're accelerating production in India or Vietnam, that's probably a good signal that alternative manufacturing hubs are about to boom. And of course, Apple is trying to do just that. Keep in mind too, Apple's had some struggles in China's market recently, showing you how vulnerable it's become. Apple's revenue in China actually dropped 11% last year, and competitors like Huawei are eating into that market. So the ultimate bad news for Apple would be that if they don't adapt to how things are going right now in China, they could get edged out of the very market that they're currently depending on. I think in the shorter term, Apple is obviously going to try to diversify some of the manufacturing process in terms of not being so reliant on China for building components. That's already underway. We'll see how much of a struggle that ends up being. In the longer term, it could be that China actually blocks access, not just to Apple, but to other US tech companies and companies in general, depending on global political events. So it's going to be something interesting to keep an eye on. Apple's always kind of been a bellwether in a lot of different circumstances, and that certainly applies here. Take it from someone who knows, tech is changing fast. And AI is not just another tool, it's reshaping everything. The real question is, will you adapt or will you get left behind? My course, My AI Edge, is the course that gives you the strategy you need to stay ahead no matter where AI takes us next. Don't just watch the future, own your place in it. Check it out now at thegreatonboarding.com.